Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I'm Joe Rocky here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, as we're here in December, we're getting to that time of the year where in the business world, people start, having these workshops about what are your goals for the upcoming year? What is the stuff that you want to accomplish? And I've gone through a lot of these throughout my life in sales training. It's a very good way of starting your program. What are we trying to get to is a better way of let's just start getting places. Having a map or directions doesn't hurt. So like I said, I've been through these for 10 years of going through stuff like this. And something happened in yesterday's that was unique to me. And I think it tells something about maybe where we're at as a country or a society, whatever the term is there. And your typical answer when you get for people, what is your goals, is I want to make 100,000 because I've never done that before. I want to add 50 new clients. I want to get into this market, whatever. They're all economic based answers. But for the first time ever, I got answers that were much more personal. It was, I want to be able to have a true steady friend in my life that's outside of the house I live in. I want to make sure that after our kids go to college next year, that me and my spouse can still be coherent and still want to be together. And it was the first time I'd ever heard relationship type things in the sales course. And for me, I'm obviously very glad with that, as I've discussed in many different arenas, especially whenever trying to promote Father and Joe, is the element that people think they can compartmentalize their lives and they can't. And yes, we are there to learn how to become better salespeople. That's a fact. But that doesn't take away that me as a salesperson doesn't override or change the rest of my life, and that this relationship identity stuff that we build is so valuably important. And it was just such a right turn from the normal, because everyone's been in these types of things where, oh, this is just going to be the same as any other type thing, just as I would imagine teaching a class would be. By the third time you're coming around on the first class, this is what we talk about. It can just kind of be like, I know what it's going to be, but you get that one little comment that makes it different, how it can just resonate with you. And that's where I want to start, Father, because that was something that resonated with me. And, we discussed about the relationships and the importance of using relationships to define us rather than titles or job positions. And I wanted to highlight that is starting to become more on the public mind.
That's great news. Yeah, I think those productivity goals are not bad and are certainly appropriate for a business setting. And it's nice to have a numeric way to evaluate progress. The reality is, even those business goals are really going to depend on relationships. I mean, you're not going to cross 100,000 or get a certain number of sales without developing relationships. And we want those relationships not just to be utilitarian, that I'm using you to make my goal, but that those relationships are genuinely human, and that we treat people as an irreducible subject, the personalistic norm of John Paul II. Every person has an infinite value and dignity, and so the person is an end in themselves. They're never a means to an end. But it's nice to hear that people in business are recognizing that other relationships in their lives are also of critical importance. It's, on the one hand, there is a meaningful separation of work and home life. There can be an unhealthy blending of the two. On the other hand, I think the healthiest companies are ones where there is such a level of trust that there can be more transparency, and the boss actually cares about how the wife and kids, or the husband and kids, are in the home, and that those things matter. And we certainly know that all the home problems are going to come into work. I mean, unless you can really compartmentalize in probably some unhealthy ways, and really leave home at home. I don't even know what that would look like. I mean, if you just had a terrible fight with your spouse, you're gonna carry it into work with you.
Mhm.
If your child is addicted to heroin or something, you're gonna carry it into work with you. And so it's entirely meaningful that setting goals about friendships and about peace in the home, about deepening spousal relationships, about being a better father, a better mother, that these would be great goals to bring into even a business setting. And I mean, you may not have a direct influence. You as uh, an employer are probably not going to do marriage counseling or set particular points of growth for one of your employees who is trying to grow in his relationship with his spouse. Although you might have some advice to offer, but at the same time, you can certainly cheer the person on. You can ask about his progress. You can encourage him that he has what it takes. You can support him, and maybe even some enrichment that would help with some of those goals. Because again, when we grow as a human person, one of the byproducts is going to be greater productivity. And certainly, as we bring happiness to work because our life is fulfilling at home, that's going to make a big difference in what kind of employee we are, what kind of colleague and friend to other employees, how responsive we are to the employer, things like that. So yeah, I think that's really encouraging news, and I think it says something about you that you're seeing employees who are valuing those kinds of things. That you're creating an environment in which that kind of thing is welcomed. You're not shouting it down, but building it up, and certainly those are important values to you. So I would say your employees are picking some of that up too.
Well, that's good. I never try to think of this as like I'm forcing anything upon them, because I have been in enough environments where it has, whether it be you got to think this way, you got to vote this way, you got to whatever this way, and I personally have the gut reaction of I just don't want to be a part of that. As soon as someone starts doing that to me, it doesn't really matter what it is, but as soon as you start getting into this pressure controlling thing, I'm out. And it's a common thread that I found with most successful people. It's, at the end of the day, I know what I'm doing. I'm not going to have someone who doesn't know what they're doing tell me how to do things correctly. And it's interesting. I'm actually reading a separate book that goes along that line of thought, is that originally, whenever cameras like real-time GoPro cameras were invented and they could get real-time feeds from individuals to places far away, in the case of the U.S. Army, they had those helmet cams that would directly feed to the people back in the training facility or wherever the high command was. And ultimately, they ended up taking those away and now just use static record you can watch after the fact. And the reason they found was that individuals that were there on the ground were getting overridden constantly by someone who was only seeing part of the picture through a computer screen, essentially trying to micromanage them from half a world away. And what they found, and this being the Army, is that that's not effective. It was like, well, obviously, the guy on the ground, you have to trust him. And the more you can trust someone, the better life is. And that gets into essentially a word that we've used a lot because it goes a lot with relationships, is to trust someone. There's that inherent vulnerability that we've discussed. You have to accept that I might have done something differently here, but that's okay that you used your free will and reason to do them. And that's why I have always argued, and I know that to be true, the more freedom you give people, the better in the long run it ends up being. There might be some shortcut hiccups. Now, that doesn't mean like, oh, you just started here today, do whatever you want. You still need to train people. I'm not trying to discount that, but to give people the opportunity to say, I have this idea that would work within this space. Let's go for it. And so many managers just don't want to do that. They want to become controlling entities. And it's baffling to me about, the whole point of getting higher and hiring more people is so you don't have to do it. Why are you hiring someone and then micromanaging them? Like, that is a waste of everybody's time and money. So the core concept baffles me, but it's still the standard. And I can write books about why this is wrong, but it really just gets to me like, well, why? Why are people so this way? I guess is my question. And it sometimes it's hard for me to grasp that kind of thing when someone's so different. It makes me think of the conversation where, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
I was just going to say, trust is hard,
Yeah.
to really trust that someone is going to do it right, do their best, and people have varying levels of responsibility. Sometimes people have such a high level of responsibility that it's really hard to let go of that and let other people make mistakes and just be ready to stand with them and help to clean up the mistakes. And sometimes, and certainly you rise up the ranks of management by being really good at things, and it can be hard to watch people not do things right. And so the temptation to step in and fix things, correct things, is perhaps the starting point, and then the oversight, not wanting to wait until the mistake, but stepping in and then watching closer and closer and closer, and then just eventually doing the thing for the person. Um, you're so right, Joe. I feel exactly the same way. I hire people so that they can do the work. The last thing I want to do is do all the work with them. I don't begin to have time for that. I think it's also, I don't know, I certainly have found the importance of believing in people and building people up. I mean, it's not unrelated to parenting, that you love your children enough that they feel loved and that they feel worthy of love and that they feel uh, good enough and that they have what it takes because dad loves me and he's with me. He's always cheering for me. Even when I do something stupid, dad's right there and he's with me and he supports me. And I always know that no matter what happens, I got my dad on my side. And when we feel like that, we feel we're able to do so much more. And the opposite happens very quickly when we micromanage. And it's then I feel suspected. Dad's suspicious of me. He doesn't think I can do it right. He's hovering around to catch me making a mistake and then to step in and do it the right way. And then I just get defeated and discouraged. And why do I even want to do it? And so then I just abandon the project and let the person do it who's obviously energized to do it. And I think that dynamic can happen very easily. I'm simplifying a lot of things. I know that all of these relationships are a little bit complicated, and managers are, there's a combination of things. I've just been listening a lot to about the Montessori approach to education, and it's related to several things. But Maria Montessori was the first female surgeon in Italy. She was completed medical school in the beginning of the 1900s and was quite an accomplished woman, but became very interested in the development of children. And so she ended up forming a school and hired some people to teach. And she just wanted to watch and learn from the children, and noted some planes of development that ages 0 to 6 is what she calls the absorbent mind, and children just take in everything. But it's really, I want to do it in that time frame, and teaching them how to do things and then letting them do it is the critical thing. And that's going to be messy. It's like they're going to spill the water. You teach them how to pour things, they're going to spill the water, half the time, but they're going to figure it out. They're going to clean it up. They're going to figure it out. They're going to get better at it. And they're going to feel confident that they can do things. And just giving them what they need to keep learning and to keep doing things, and then empowering their freedom to make choices. And anyway, there's a whole fascinating level of development. The second developmental plane, from 6 to 12, is a lot more consolidation, the beginning of the use of reason. They're able to make more judgments and then form in a different way. The next plane of development, 12 to 18, is sort of like a second childhood as they're getting birthed into adulthood. And then again, they need a lot of opportunity to try it and to do it and to learn it and to not be micromanaged, to be supported and to have the adult there to help as needed, but basically to try to practice being adults and to try it out. And then 18 to 24 is another consolidation plane of development. Anyway, I think employees are a similar kind of thing. When they come into a workspace, they've got to absorb a lot of stuff, and you have to expose them to things. You teach them how to do things. You give them a chance to do it. You might have to show them once more, and then you want them to be free to do it and figure it out and to make good choices and to be as much a kind of partial owner, to really take personal responsibility for the job, the project, the company as possible.
Absolutely. And all of those things you said, that there was a couple thoughts that I had there. It is really hard to give someone the desire to go out and accomplish things. But it is also really easy to kill it. And that is an unfortunate fact of life. You can wear people down saying, like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And I was on someone else's show, and he told me that according to research studies, that 90% of the people quit the environment rather than the job. And the way they measure this is, do you go back to basically do the same job just somewhere else, or are you completely switching industries altogether? And the majority of people it's because the people around them, which essentially comes down to culture, which is a sum of relationships. And as you're going through and saying that, we can get into spots where we're not sure where the problem went wrong. In the example you just gave there of teaching people to go through things and they're going to mess it up. Well, in your example, you want them to pour the water correctly and do things right. And I'm the same way. You spill it, you go and clean it up. Well, at least in my world, now granted, he's a 1-year-old, he thinks the cleaning it up is the fun part, rather than the pouring it correctly. So what do? We get water all over the place, and he loves just wiping everything up, which on the one hand, good, success, but it's not almost, it is the exact opposite of what the intended goal was. And you really hit the nail on the head about how to make it work. You give people the freedom and, if possible or appropriate, rather, ownership of it. If you're going to be doing this much of the sales entity, and sales is obviously the most important part of any business, we're going to compensate you that you might be the highest paid person in the room if you perform. And then all of a sudden, people who are motivated for achievement, money, accolades, it's just now a competition, and this is just the scoreboard. And it's nice that the scoreboard is cashable. But it's important to know what drives people. And before we were starting the day, obviously both of us are accomplished in our various fields. In fact, we don't talk about how accomplished you are. You're essentially a world-class expert on prayer that is above and beyond basically anyone else I think I've ever talked to. And we don't bring it up nearly enough. And but our personalities are so different. I was telling you about how I'm starting a new project, about how I basically cannot stomach something that would probably take someone who knew what they were doing 30 minutes. And because it frustrates me, it upsets me, and I just don't want to do it, it's been taking 3 weeks, which actually just compounds the problem, because it's just sitting in the back of my mind that I got to figure out how to do this. But it's all building a website from scratch and jargon that I have no idea. So now I'm Googling things and YouTubing things that someone with a little bit of competence would just know all this stuff. Basically, it's probably website 101 type stuff that is just too big of a hurdle for me. And for me, I just basically want to throw up and burn the internet down. And for someone who's gone through computer engineering, they're like, oh, this is nothing. Boom, boom, boom. 3 seconds later. And And I say that because obviously two different personality types, two different desires to have, but any personality type can get to success. You don't have to be just this way or this archetype. You have to have a knowledge base, a desire to want to do it. And the desire, really comes from, do I want to be here? I mean, it's a starting point. I mean, that's like bare minimum stuff. Do I want to be here? And, working out that's really a relationship question the majority of the time. So those are thoughts that I've had going through my mind about, business and life as we're entering the new year. And it's just that time to think about stuff.
No, it's great thoughts. I really, really appreciate that. What you said about how hard it can be to inspire and motivate, how easy it can be to squelch and destroy. It's, I suppose, a general easier to tear a house down than to build one up, right? So thinking in those terms, and I think it's, I used the analogy already between employment, leadership, and fatherhood or motherhood, and so much of it is learning how to build people up and then giving them, some teaching and some tasks that they can accomplish and then celebrating those things. But when we can bring out the best in people, it was sort of the departure point from our last conversation was there are a lot of people who are functioning at pretty low levels of motivation, low levels of confidence, who end up self-sabotaging, who are not doing it because they're bad people. They're not lazy. They're not malicious. They're not just trying to cheat people. They just are crushed in so many ways. And bringing about the healing to believe in people, which happens primarily through love and relationship, through connections. It's hard work. And then we've got to persevere with people. And then to see the transformations take place is just incredible. I mentioned the book Tattoos on the Heart, Father Gregory Boyle, who works with inner city gang members in LA, and over the past several decades, 30, 40 years, has just helped so many young men and women out of those terrible gang situations, giving them employment, helping them to reconcile with rival gang members, helping them to have families and to begin a new life. And that's an extreme example, but it's really hard work and really meaningful work that's possible. So at a lesser level, knowing that not everybody is as damaged, so we say, traumatized as gang members who are in a whole mess of a situation, but a lot of people from childhood wounds, from growing up in poverty, from having a lot of bad environments, have a lot of struggles, and creating a good environment, believing in people, persevering with them, having some patience and mercy, and teaching, helping, inspiring, celebrating. It's amazing. I think a lot of people can be a lot better if we take that sort of approach to them.
And I've been thinking about that specific issue. I guess this is more outside of business context now, more of a society thought that I've had at it is so much of this is habitual. And I know I brought up in that last episode that they even talked about this in the Bible, and the way that they did was the argument that, or not argument, the statement that is this person sinned because of his father's sins. And we've discussed so many times about the recidivism through the generations. If you are used to being beaten as a kid and seeing your mother get beaten, you are likely to become the beater when you grow up. It's just a fact. And where I've been trying to figure this out is the way it actually plays out in life is that those type of angry and hyper aggressive adolescents, the teenagers, tend to end up roaming together. And the people that don't want to deal with that separate themselves out. And it almost ends up being that, at least the way that I'm looking at it and trying to be as objective as possible, that people self-put themselves in those similar groups because that's what they can relate to and that's what they're related with. And to try to jump from one group to another can be difficult, if not right, impossible, to be able to figure out how to relate and how to bring that much of compassion, be able to relatability and be authentic. There's a lot of times that comes across as just someone trying to virtue signal and they don't really know what they're doing. They just want to get a photo op and move on. But they don't really care about solving the core problem that has gotten there. And I look at this from a society standpoint of, aside from the answer of being a better parent, I don't know how you could implement something like this in a scale where it actually would fix the problem. Because at least as Americans, we don't really allow judging of the way you are a parent. You're in your own house, do whatever you want. In some regards, I totally agree with that mentality, but this is also an inevitable byproduct that people that are broken end up finding other broken people so that they can keep their ways of being this way. So the people that are the ones who are more prone to beat their children, beat their wives, inherently end up finding people that are more willing to accept that. And then by default, you have another generation built, while the segment of the population that would never find that acceptable goes off and does their own thing because they don't want to deal with that. And again, I don't know how you fix that problem, because it gets into some of this self-selection stuff we talked about. That guy's not going to show up to a parenting seminar. It's going to be the guy who already is trying to make himself better and recognizes that he wants to have better. So you're going to get people from the group that aren't in the wife beater category. And it's really a tough problem that I have been trying to put thought into, like, what could actually be done about this? What is a pathway that could work, that could be universally acceptable? Because while an individual saint can do a lot of greatness, as you've referenced with the father there, most people are never going to put that kind of ability in, let alone even have it. So how can we make it more palatable for the commoners, without a better way of figuring out how to say that? That's what's been trying to figure out on my side of the fence here, Father.
It sounds like another episode.
I think it's going to have to be, as I'm looking at the time clock here. We're here at the end of the episode here. So with that said, you just heard the preview of what will be next week's episode. We thank you guys all for enjoying us and sharing us. We do grow by you guys sharing us, and we will be with you again here next week.